Welcome everyone to the BCM Game of the Month for December 2013. At the time of recording, the chess world is being enthralled by the goings on in Chennai, the World Championship match between Carlsen and Anand. But there are a lot of other big chess events going on. And I've chosen my game this month from the European Team Championship. In fact, from the match between Slovenia and Armenia. It's the game between Duško Pavasovic, grade 2563, and one of the strongest players in the world, Pavasovic-Aronian, playing with black, 2801. And it features a very interesting line of the Rilo-Pes, which has been hitherto very rarely played, but is actually coming more and more to fashion, especially with the world's elite players. Now, virtually new lines against the Rilo-Pes are very rare indeed, but that's exactly what we get here, as after bishop a4, Aronian now played this move, knight ge7. If we drop back one move to bishop b5, knight ge7 here has been played, albeit infrequently, and it's known as the Cosio variation. In general, when black plays with an early knight ge7, he's thinking of one of two things. He's thinking that he wants to set up maybe a King's Indian formation with g6, bishop g7, and the point of putting the knight on e7 is to leave the f-pawn unobstructed. White generally has to play very energetically against this g6 plan to get any advantage at all, or black just sets up a good King's Indian formation and then breaks with f5. So that's one plan for black. Another plan, quite thematic in the Cosio variation, is just to redirect this knight to g6. I would put this in the solid but passive category. There are certain lines against which black can do that, and other lines where white builds up in the centre with a quick c3 and d4, where he would be ill-advised to play like this. The question now really is, what effect does a6 have on the position? How does this change things? You might think not much, but Aronian shows that there are very interesting independent characteristics to the move a6. For instance, a quick b5 is on the cards. Now, what difference does that make? Well, Pavasovic, I think he's been taken out of his comfort zone already because he played the move bishop b3. That has been played, and white certainly sets up the cheeky threat of knight g5. But it looks a little bit luxurious at this stage. I don't think white could hope for much with bishop b3. Okay, you've got a threat, but black can easily deal with this threat. Much more critical seems to be either to play c3, which is probably the main line, if there is one, or to castle. And after c3, black generally goes g6. There are several games of Mamedyarov using this variation, and the idea now is to make use of a6 by playing b5, hitting the bishop drops back, and now black goes d5. A couple of interesting games from Mamedyarov in 2013 against Peter Leko and against Karyarkin, where black drew both games. And the jury's out as to whether this is okay for black or not. But certainly at the moment, white is struggling to prove any advantage against it. So that's black's plan against c3. If white castles in this position, a slightly more leisurely build-up, then again g6 is the move. And we get a similar sort of position here, where after takes b5, bishop b3, and now castles, yes, white has a centre, but black has counter-punching chances against the centre. And all in all, this position is very unclear. This was a game smearing Mamedyarov also from 2013. Well, when you play Aronian, there's always the chance the guy's got some sort of an improvement ready. Pavasovic settles for bishop b3. And black broke immediately in the centre with d5. Now, of course, that's the classic free and break in the open game. The question is, can black get away with it in this particular position? If he can, then obviously it should be played, because it frees black's game at a stroke. Well, just going back, a completely different type of game was launched in Movsesian Mamedyarov, Rhodes 2013, where black played this plan with knight to g6. Again, I would stress that I classify this as solid but passive. Black's going to indulge himself in a very steady build-up here. He's probably going to put the bishop on e7. He's probably just going to castle and await events. At some point, a little later in the game, perhaps that knight can even hop into f4. Well, Movsesian didn't want any of that and launched the charge with h4. And then the game could have gone into the twilight zone after bishop e7, h5. As it happened, Movsesian delayed h5 for one move, but h5 here is quite interesting, and white can sack a pawn after d4. Well, black shouldn't refuse. King f1, bring his knight back. And now we just get a really interesting and totally unclear position, whether white takes on e5 here or plays d5. Something like knight a5, knight takes e5, takes, g5. Well, you couldn't recognise this as anything coming from a Ruy Lopez. It's about as un-Ruy Lopez-like as it gets, which of course was probably Aronian's intention in this game. He wants to take play into relatively uncharted waters. Well, this is pretty uncharted. Just casting our eye over the actual move order in Movsesian Mamedyarov, white played d3 here, black played h6, white played h5, and now not knight f4, but knight h4. And then we just got a very unclear situation where white nudged the bishop back, played his bishop to e3, and now black played knight a5. Again, this was a success for black, a relative success, in that the game was drawn in 41 moves. Black seems to be in good shape here to nab the Lopez bishop on b3. So all very interesting and unclear. Back now to the game itself, Pavasovic versus Aronian. Bishop b3, black breaks in the centre with this interesting move d5. White played knight c3, black played bishop e6, and now knight g5 must be the only critical reply, putting the question to the bishop on e6. Well, Aronian didn't seem to worry too much about this. He played very boldly and played the excellent move, knight to d4 here, after which I don't really think that white has any advantage in this position, because yes, white will get the bishop on e6, but black's also in good shape to nab that bishop on b3. Pavasovic castled. Well, he could delay that and play d3 first, and after that I think black takes on b3. Now white has an interesting choice. He can obviously recapture on b3. Black plays queen d7. I don't see anything wrong with black's position here. He's got a nice centre. Yes, white can take on e6, but this doesn't give white any clear advantage at all. Black's going to unravel with a move like knight c6. Should be okay for him. White can try to improve this line by, after knight takes b3, taking on e6, doubling black's pawns, and now take on b3. Well, there we have d4, knight e2, knight c6, and again black is unravelling with bishop d6. This also seems relatively comfortable for black. Yes, he's got double pawns, but these pawns cover important central squares. And, well, this looks okay. So probably Pavasovic was mulling all this over. In the end, he decides to castle. Aronian hoovers off the bishop, and then he pushes forward in the centre. So now we're going to get a very similar position to the line we just looked at, but with the vital difference that black can play d3. And I think this is even better for black than the previous line, as this pawn advance is quite embarrassing for white. And with it, black is completely taking over the initiative. So after only 12 moves, for the Ruy Lopez, we've got a very unusual position, and one in which black is okay. More than okay, I think. In fact, he's starting to dictate terms. White played b4, freeing up his queen, seeing nothing better. And rather than grab the pawn on e4 straight away, Aronian coordinated his pieces with knight to c6. This looks very good, as black's idea now is maybe even to put the knight in on c2 if he gets the chance. White tries to head this off at the pass by hitting the queen, more or less forcing a capture on e4. And it seems to me already that white is hoping for something when he plays his rook to e3. Already, Aronian is in charge of this game. He's a pawn up, albeit a double pawn, and the problem for white is that he's got no way of taking advantage of the black king in the centre. Moreover, after knight g3, Aronian castled on the queen side. Now white is in really serious trouble. Rook e4 followed, queen b5, and now queen to g4. And once again, Aronian played for coordination here with king to b8. He notes that queen takes e6 is answered simply by bishop takes b4, when black remains a pawn up. So Pavasovic tries to get his struggling bishop on c1 going by playing d3. Rook takes d3, why not take a second pawn? At least this way white gets his pieces out. Well, black played g6, another steady move. And now white played h4. Already he's down to moves like this. He's playing on the wrong side of the board. But if you think about it, what has he got? Black's getting ready to take on b5 in this position, b4 in this position. Full coordination follows with rook a d8. White has got nothing for his pawns. So h4, trying to stir things up. Aronian takes the pawn, of course. White pushes on. Black takes on h5. Knight takes h5 was answered by bishop d2. And knight f6 by the simple bishop takes e3. White recaptured. And now black brought his queen into b3. A very strong move, both protecting e6 and attacking e3. And white could find nothing better than king to h2. Now, clearly, queen e2 protects both b2 and e3, but in every other respect, it's a very passive move. And I think rook h d8 is just pretty good for black here. Well, in fact, it's winning, I think. Because after rook f2, protecting the second rank, we go check on d1, and then rook c1. And I don't really see white coming back from this, as black's threat is to bring his other rook down to d1 with a, well, probably a winning attack. So going back to the game itself, Pavasovic tried king h2, probably wondering what had gone wrong in this game, and Aronian just chopped off the pawn. Queen takes e6 was answered by h5, and knight d7 check by king a7. Throughout this game, white never made it to full coordination, and black's next move emphasises that, when Aronian completely ignored the attack on the rook at h8 and played the killer blow, rook d2. Well, if white defends g2, then rook g8 is coming up. If he allows the capture on g2, then it's curtains. So all in all, very interesting stuff all the way through. And, well, it's important to draw your attention to this relatively new line of the Ruy Lopez. Will we see a lot more of knight ge7 in the near future?